Pam Bondi stood at the edge of the stage, bathed in the soft glow of golden spotlights, her blonde hair pulled back in a poised, elegant twist. The auditorium had fallen silent for her, but that silence was quickly pierced by a sharp laugh from the third row, a scoff loud enough to echo. It wasn't the first time she'd been mocked, and it wouldn't be the last, but this one hit different. The moment hung there like a bruise in the air, swelling with tension. The source was a young man in a navy hoodie, his voice layered with sarcasm as he said, "Of course she believes in angels and miracles. She probably thinks the earth is flat, too." A ripple of laughter followed, shallow and cruel, feeding on the kind of cynicism that lives on the internet and occasionally slips into real-life spaces like this one. Pam's jaw tensed, but she didn't flinch. She took a breath, so slow it seemed as if she was reeling in every insult she'd ever endured and filtering it through something softer, deeper, harder to shake. Her hands tightened slightly around the microphone, but she didn't raise her voice. "I do believe in angels," she said, her tone steady, silk-wrapped steel. "And I've seen miracles." The crowd quieted. A few people exchanged glances, unsure of whether she was serious or gearing up for some larger punchline, but she wasn't playing to their doubt. She took a step forward, her heels clicking softly on the wooden stage floor, the rhythm calm and unwavering. "When my father was dying, I prayed harder than I ever had in my life. And even though I didn't get the answer I wanted, something happened in that hospital room that I still can't explain. Something warm, something peaceful. I don't care what you call it, but I know what I felt. That was no joke." The laughter had stopped, and in its absence, a kind of uncomfortable respect began to settle. The young man shifted in his seat, suddenly fascinated by the zipper on his hoodie. Pam's voice didn't rise, didn't crack. It just flowed, measured and bright. "I've been mocked for a lot of things in my life. For being a woman in politics, for being tough, for being compassionate, for wearing pink while talking about prison reform, and yes, for my faith. But let me ask you something. Why does that bother you?" There was a pause, heavy and deliberate, as she scanned the room. "Does it scare you that someone can believe in something more? That even in this messy, loud, broken world, we still cling to something beautiful?" Her eyes locked with a woman near the back, tears forming just beneath her mascara. "Because I do. I believe in beauty. I believe in forgiveness. I believe in second chances, and I believe in a God who offers them." The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was full, aching, brimming with thoughts too big to be expressed out loud. A few heads nodded tentatively, like flowers testing the light. Pam smiled then, not with triumph, but with grace. She didn't need to win the room. She needed only to tell the truth. "I don't wear my faith like armor," she said. "I wear it like skin. Sometimes it gets bruised, sometimes it hurts, but it's mine, and it's real." A single clap started from the back. Cautious, at first but honest, it was followed by another, and another, until the sound built into something steady and sincere. Pam didn't bow, didn't bask. She simply stood there, hands folded, eyes bright, heart wide open. She knew that comeback wasn't made with fire or fury. It was made with stillness, with truth, with the kind of quiet courage that doesn't shout but doesn't back down, either. And as the applause carried her off stage, she whispered beneath her breath, not for anyone else, but just for herself, "They'll mock me again, but I'll still believe." That was only the beginning. The night after the speech, Pam Bondi sat alone in her hotel room, her reflection cast faintly in the dark window beside her. The applause had faded hours ago, the lights dimmed, and yet the echo of that young man's scoff clung to her thoughts like smoke in her lungs. She wasn't angry, not really. What she felt was older, deeper, something close to sorrow. It wasn't just about her faith being mocked. It was about the world forgetting how to listen, how to believe in anything they couldn't touch or argue with. She poured a glass of water from a plastic hotel pitcher and sat at the edge of the bed, her phone buzzing quietly on the nightstand. Messages had flooded in. some praising her grace, others calling her delusional. She read them all. She always did. The cruel ones didn't sting anymore, but she remembered each one. Not because she believed them, but because they reminded her how lost people had become, how starved for something good and still they chose bitterness instead of hope. A message caught her eye. It was from a woman named Rebecca. The subject line read, "You changed something in me tonight." Pam hesitated, her finger trembling slightly before tapping it open. "I was that girl," the message read. "I was the girl in the back, crying. I haven't prayed in 10 years, not since I lost my son. But when you talked about your father, about feeling something warm in that hospital room, I felt it too. Just remembering. I don't know what to do with that yet, but thank you for speaking like that, for believing when it's easier not to." Pam read the message twice, then a third time, her throat tightening. The rawness of it unspooled her. She placed a hand gently on her chest, where her heart beat steady and sure, a silent hymn no one else could hear. The next morning brought headlines. Some cruel, some celebratory. "Bondi preaches from the podium," one read. Another, "Pam Bondi delivers faith-filled clapback to heckler." But there was one that stopped her cold. It was a blog post, shared by a former critic of hers. Someone she never thought would have the capacity for fairness. The post read, "I didn't expect to cry, but I did." The blog was humble, written in plain language, no frills. It described how the writer had gone to the event expecting a polished political pitch, not an emotional reckoning. "I don't agree with Pam Bondi on everything, not even most things. But when she stood there and talked about her faith like it was oxygen, like it was skin, something in me broke open. I realized I'd forgotten how to speak with that kind of honesty. I didn't expect to cry, but I did. And maybe that's the first step back to something I lost a long time ago." Pam closed the laptop slowly, a weight lifting and shifting inside her chest. She wasn't trying to change minds that night, not really. She wasn't trying to convert anyone. She just wanted them to understand her. To see that behind the polish and politics, there was still a girl who prayed at night, who cried in hospital rooms, who believed in light when all she could see was dark. A knock sounded at her hotel door. It was one of her aides, breathless, holding a folded letter. "This came for you," she said. "Hand delivered. No return address." Pam took it, fingers brushing the worn paper. Inside was a single line, written in thick black ink. "I mocked you last night. I'm sorry. I wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing because I didn't know how to feel anymore." Her breath caught, the moment freezing in her throat. She sat down slowly, the paper trembling in her hand. These were the moments no cameras captured, the quiet aftermath of courage, the ripples after the stone. She folded the letter carefully, placed it in her journal, and whispered a prayer not of triumph but of gratitude, not for applause, but for cracks in the armor of a cynical world, and the light that slipped through them. 3 days later, Pam Bondi found herself driving alone on a 2-lane road that cut through the Florida countryside like a thread sewn between fields of forgotten quiet. The sky hung low and pale, the clouds soft and bruised with the threat of rain, but she welcomed it. There was something about the hush before a storm that reminded her of prayer, how the world seems to hold its breath just long enough for you, to hear your own soul whisper. She wasn't heading to a podium or a studio, no reporters, no schedule. Just a small church she used to pass as a girl, its wooden frame now leaning a little more than it had in her memories, the paint peeled like bark. She didn't know exactly why she needed to go there, only that something inside her was pulling her toward it. Maybe it was the woman's email, or the note left at her hotel. Maybe it was the dozens more that had flooded in, handwritten letters from strangers who admitted they hadn't knelt in years, some who didn't even believe in God but believed in her moment of stillness. People confessing that they didn't understand faith, but maybe they'd been wrong to laugh at it. The gravel crunched beneath her tires as she pulled into the overgrown lot. The air smelled like wet pine and old wood, and 1,000 memories stirred in her chest. The door creaked when she pushed it open. No congregation inside, no choir, just rows of pews, dust motes floating like blessings in the beams of light that filtered through the stained glass windows. She walked slowly, her heels echoing gently off the floor, then slipped them off and stepped barefoot down the aisle. She knelt at the altar, her hands pressed together, not tightly, but loosely, like a child resting in her mother's arms. For a long time, she said nothing. No words, just breath, just heartbeats. The quiet inside the church felt different than any silence she'd ever known. It wasn't empty, it was listening, waiting, holding. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft she wasn't sure if she was talking to God or to the ache inside her. "I don't know what to do with all of this," she said. "With the mockery, with the praise, with the weight of being believed in by people who don't even know me. I'm not perfect. I'm not a preacher. I'm not even always brave. I'm just trying." Tears came, but they didn't sting. They flowed like something old being washed away. She let them fall, not wiping them. This place, this moment, had waited for her. And somehow, it knew what to do with her sorrow. Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. Storms come, but they pass. When Pam stood and turned, she saw someone sitting quietly in the last pew. An older man, wrinkled and sun-weathered, holding a Bible that looked nearly as ancient as the wood around them. He hadn't said a word. She walked toward him slowly, unsure if he was real or just a ghost from a time when the world was quieter, kinder. As she approached, he smiled gently, his eyes warm. "You made them listen," he said simply. "That's not easy." Pam felt the weight of his words settle over her like a shawl. "They didn't all listen," she said. He nodded. "No, but the right ones did." She sat beside him. "They didn't speak for a long time. Sometimes silence between two believers says more than scripture." "I used to be a pastor here," he said after a while, "long ago, before it emptied out. People stopped coming. Said they didn't need God anymore. Said they had better things to do. But when things got hard, some of them came back. Not to hear sermons. Just to be reminded that love still lived. Here." Pam looked at him, her heart catching in her throat. "I don't know if I'll ever fill a church," she whispered. "You already did," he said. "That night, on that stage. You didn't preach, you testified. And that matters more." She let that truth settle into her bones. When she returned to the car, her phone buzzed again. Another message. This one from a college student in Pennsylvania. She read it aloud, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know me, but I watched the video of your speech online. I'm gay. I've been told my whole life that God doesn't love me. I used to believe them. But when you spoke, it felt like, maybe he does. You didn't even mention me, but I felt seen. I don't know why. I just did." Pam's breath caught, her fingers tightening around the phone. That night, she sat at her kitchen table back home, pen in hand, writing letters back to the ones who had written her. She didn't type. She wrote by hand. Because they deserved. More than a reply, they deserved presence. To the woman who lost her son, she wrote, "Grief never asks for permission. But neither does healing. You felt something that night because your love is still alive. That's not madness. That's mercy." To the anonymous mocker, she wrote, "I don't hate you. I understand you. I've laughed at things I didn't know how to face too. You're not lost. You're just searching, and there's no shame in that." To the gay student, she wrote with trembling hands, "You are loved, fully, deeply, eternally. I don't need to know your name to know your worth. No one gets to gatekeep grace. Ever." The world outside kept spinning, loud and messy as ever. But inside her home, inside her heart, there was stillness. A space where belief lived. Not loud, not boastful, but steadfast. Steady. The next morning, she found a letter on her porch. Handwritten. "Thank you. You didn't change my mind." but you opened my heart. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough." Pam smiled, her fingers curling around the envelope. "Yes, maybe, just maybe, that is enough." A week passed, then 2, and yet the ripples of that night continued to move outward, reaching places even Pam Bondi never expected. Her inbox overflowed with stories, people opening old wounds, revisiting abandoned beliefs, trying to make sense of something they hadn't thought about in years. She read every single message, never skimming, never deleting. It was like collecting pieces of a broken stained glass window, each shard different, jagged but beautiful in its honesty. News outlets kept circling. Some tried to spin her moment into a political headline. Others, more sympathetic, called it a spiritual reckoning in an age of mockery. But the truth was simpler than any headline could hold. What happened that night wasn't about politics or image. It was about a human being standing alone and unashamed in her belief, daring to show something raw in a world addicted to cynicism. Her days blurred into quiet conversations and long walks. Strangers approached her now, not with agendas, but with trembling smiles and tear-glossed eyes. A woman in a grocery store clutched her arm and whispered, "I'm praying again, for the first time in 15 years. A young man in a diner recognized her and left a note on her napkin. "My mother always believed. I used to mock her. But I think I understand now." She carried those moments like prayers tucked in her pockets, revisiting them when the world roared too loud. One evening, she visited a community center in a small, struggling neighborhood on the outskirts of Orlando. The pastor there, a soft-spoken woman with calloused hands and fire in her eyes, had invited her after hearing the story. Pam arrived, quietly, without fanfare. No press, no entourage. Just her, a simple dress, and a heart still learning how to carry all this grace. The room was filled with folding chairs, plastic cups of lemonade, and about 50 people who looked like they didn't believe in easy answers. Skepticism hung in the air like humidity, thick and unspoken. But Pam wasn't there to impress them. She stood at the front with her hands clasped, eyes gentle, voice low. "I'm not here to convince you," she began. "I'm just here to tell you what I've seen." And she did. She told them about her father, about the hospital room filled with something holy she couldn't explain. She told them about the laughter that stung and the silence that followed it. She told them about the handwritten letters, the confessions from strangers, the quiet ache of a world searching for meaning without knowing where to look. "I don't have answers," she said, "but I have faith. Not because it's easy, but because it's the only thing that ever held me together when everything else fell apart." A man in the back, tall, arms crossed, jaw clenched, stood up. His voice cracked slightly. "What if you've been lied to your whole life? What if there's no one listening when you pray?" The question didn't rattle her. She walked toward him slowly, her heels silent on the tile. "Then I'd rather live believing someone hears me," she said, "than live in silence pretending I don't need to be heard." The room went quiet. Not out of shock, but reverence. The kind of silence that follows something true. The man didn't sit down. Instead, he looked at her for a long time, his eyes softening in a way he probably didn't expect. "My wife left me last year," he said. "Cancer. I stopped praying the night she died. I couldn't do it anymore." Pam reached out, no barrier between them. "Maybe you didn't stop praying," she said. "Maybe grief just took over the words." He swallowed hard, nodded once, and sat down. When the night ended, no applause followed. No one stood in ovation. But people lingered. They didn't rush out the door. They stayed, talked, prayed quietly, some for the first time in years. Pam walked out into the parking lot beneath a velvet sky, the stars hidden behind low clouds but still there. She felt them, just like she felt the presence of her father, her faith, and something else, something vast, tender, and impossibly strong. Back. At her car, she found a small envelope tucked under the windshield wiper. No name, just a note that read, "Tonight, I cried for the first time in 5 years, not because I'm weak, but because I remembered I'm human. Thank you. She sat in the driver's seat, the engine off, the windows down. The night air curled around her, warm and heavy with the scent of jasmine. She closed her eyes and rested her head back, whispering a quiet prayer, not for herself, but for the ones who still didn't know they were worthy of being heard. This journey wasn't about being right. It wasn't about rebuttals or viral moments. It was about reclamation, of silence, of faith, of something holy in the everyday. And in that still moment, sitting alone beneath an unseen sky, Pam knew the truth more deeply than ever. They could mock her 1,000 times, but she would still show up, still speak, still believe. Weeks passed, then a month, and still, the quiet hum of something eternal seemed to follow Pam Bondi wherever she went. Not fame, not the kind with flashing cameras and bold headlines, but something quieter, more sacred, something like reverence, something like recognition from the soul. She would walk through airports, sit at coffee shops, attend meetings, and there would always be someone, not always bold, not always articulate, but someone with eyes that glistened as they mouthed, "Thank you." One day, she returned to her home in Tampa after a string of speaking engagements. The air was warm and heavy, laced with salt from the nearby Gulf, the way it always was in the spring. She stepped inside her house, where her golden retriever greeted her with the same unchanging, unconditional love, tail wagging as though no time had passed. She dropped her keys on the hallway table and exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for days. And then she saw it. A package on the dining table. Square. Wrapped in brown paper. No return address. Cautiously, she unwrapped it, her fingers delicate, as though she knew whatever was inside deserved a kind of reverence. Inside was a leather-bound journal, worn and soft at the edges. Inside the cover was a note. "This belonged to my sister. She passed away 3 years ago. She never stopped believing, even when the world mocked her for it. Your words reminded me of her. I'm not ready to believe again, not yet. But I wanted you to have this. Because you speak the way she used to write." Pam sat down slowly, the journal resting in her lap like something sacred. She opened it and read the first page. The handwriting was elegant but urgent, each word aching to be remembered. "Faith doesn't save me from the fire. It reminds me I'm not walking through it alone." Pam's chest ached in the most tender way. This was it, the invisible thread that tied her to people she would never meet, to a chorus of souls too often silenced by shame, by the fear of being dismissed, by the sting of a cynical world. She wasn't the voice of them. She wasn't their savior, but she was a mirror, and through her own wounds, they were seeing themselves again. Not broken, not weak, just still capable of feeling. She spent that afternoon reading page after page, letters to God, letters to doubt, letters to no one. It felt like she was holding someone's soul in her hands, and it was not light, but it was beautiful. That night, a church in downtown Tampa asked her to speak. It was a youth gathering, mostly teens and college students, most of them raised on skepticism and the noise of a digital world. She almost said no. She felt too fragile. From the journal, too, cracked open. But something in her told her to go. She didn't prepare a speech. She didn't write a single note. She walked onto the stage and looked at the sea of young, guarded faces. Some were bored, some were curious, some were already daring her to say something real. She smiled. Not a political smile. A human one. "I used to think faith made me untouchable," she began. "But it didn't. It made me soft. It made me vulnerable. It made me feel everything harder. That's what they don't tell you. Faith doesn't make pain go away. It just gives it meaning." A boy in the front row, arms folded, raised his eyebrows like a challenge. Pam walked closer to the edge of the stage. "You don't have to believe in God tonight, but believe in something. Believe in the strength it takes to cry and still wake up the next morning. Believe in how brave it is to hope when you've been disappointed over and over again. Believe in mercy, even when you've never seen it in real life. Her voice lowered, and the room leaned in. "You want to know what faith really is?" she whispered. "It's writing in a journal even when no one will ever read it. It's saying a prayer that might never be answered. It's forgiving someone who never apologized. It's choosing to love in a world that keeps telling you it's safer to hate." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was holy. "I read a journal today," she said, "from a young woman who died 3 years ago. She believed more purely than most people live. And in her pages, I found a line I'll never forget. Faith doesn't save me from the fire. It reminds me I'm not walking through it alone." Pam saw it then, a shift in the room, arms slowly uncrossing, eyes softening, a tear falling without shame. "You don't need to stand for something grand," she continued. "Sometimes standing at all is enough. Sometimes breathing through the pain is the prayer." Afterward, they didn't rush the stage like fans. They walked slowly, deliberately, as if stepping toward something they were scared to name but desperate to touch. Girl with purple hair and shaking hands said, "I stopped believing in everything after my mom died, but tonight, I think I want to try again. I think I want to write." Pam hugged her, tears silently falling down her own face. Later, as she walked outside into the cool night, the stars finally visible above her, she looked up and whispered, "A thank you. Not to an audience, not to a crowd, just to the heavens." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another message. This one just 2 lines. "I was the guy in the hoodie that night. I've been sober 19 days. I'm praying again. Thank you for not hating me." She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. They had mocked her, ridiculed her, dismissed her, but they had listened, and now they were answering back, not with applause or arguments, but with broken hearts cracking open again, with tears, with truth, with fragile, fierce, beautiful belief. She stood there a long time, arms wrapped around herself as the wind carried the scent of spring and redemption. She wasn't a preacher. She wasn't perfect. She was simply a woman who refused to hide the light inside her, even when the world laughed, and that light, bruised but burning, was now lighting torches in the dark. One by one, heart by heart, until mockery faded, and only the miracle remained.